I had to go find the microphone, it was missing. Hi, Peggy.
You didn't need a microphone for us.
Well, that's the thing. I was thinking if, oh, hi, John. I was thinking if I don't find it, it's not tragic, because I can still, you know, I can project well enough. How are you all liking the fact that nobody's wearing a mask?
Really good.
Isn't that
I like it a
awesome?
lot.
Yeah,
Very
it is
strange. It's very, yes.
We don't want to get too confident. You never know when you're going to be back.
That's exactly right.
Are they having problems in
Enjoy the
Europe?
moment.
That's real, yeah, that's very true. But it's quite an adjustment. Every time I get up to leave my office, I go it's like I have to do something.
It's almost like a reflex now.
I take it to a shop. This guy's still
Oh, I do. Because I thought she was at the front desk. Was there.
Okay, are we ready to take a little nap?
We're ready.
No, I wouldn't have done that.
All right, so Kiki, you can push that record button if you like.
Okay,
Did you already do it?
maybe.
Do you need the light?
No.
I'm sorry, honey, I can't hear you.
No.
Did you push, is it recording?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Do you have a mask on?
Yeah, I can take
You can
it.
take your mask off. I forgot to tell you that. I forgot to let you know that you could take your mask off. I'd like to, welcome you all to Head Talks. This is our last in the China series. Isn't that amazing? That went by really fast, didn't it?
Yeah.
It did for me.
Way too fast. Yes, yeah, Pat, it did for you.
I missed it all.
If you missed any, and you're inclined to use the internet, you could see it on YouTube. They're downloaded on YouTube now, all of these. So we're going to have to choose another topic. Has anybody given that any thought?
Middle East.
I sent you a bunch of suggestions. I haven't heard.
That was like a year ago.
No, it was less than a year ago.
6 months ago?
11
It
months
was
ago.
About
last
11.
month.
It was, all right, I'll look and see. Yes, John?
Well, I don't know, sorry, maybe great comics, historical great comics,
Great comics,
comedians, comics.
great comedians. I like the direction that you're going.
Yeah, we do need the
We
laugh.
need a little comic relief. Okay, so that's,
A lot of reasons.
yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yes, I was thinking that, Esther, too.
I could say he is a comic.
What?
I could say he is a comedian,
Yes,
John.
John is a comedian. All right, we'll do a Head Talk series on John.
I'm gonna buy him a pair of shorts. I'm a Putin.
How about what?
Putin.
No. We have enough of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want a little relief from, 24/7 news. Okay, so we'll think about that. We're not going to be meeting for 2 weeks because next week there's staff trainings that are going on. So they're going to need this space, a lot of the spaces. And then the week after is the cornhole competition between staff and residents. And I know where you're all going to be. And it's not here. All right, I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be, I wouldn't want to miss that either. And then hi Effie.
Hello.
One last thing is I want to introduce you to Kiki. Kiki is our brand new volunteer. When I say she's brand new, I mean she's 5 minutes old. She just started 5 minutes ago. Hi, Kiki.
Hi.
So Kiki, everyone, Kiki, and she's going to be running our video camera for us. Just ironically, when she came in to interview, she said that her hobby is photography. And I immediately said, oh, I know what we can do. Oh, how nice. Okay, so as if you were here earlier, I was saying, because it's our last in this China series, I had to get in the Panda Bear.
Of course.
All right, we did the dragon, and now this is my ode to the Panda Bear. It was just, I was gonna say it's the cutest one I could find. They were all cute. They were just all cute.
He's dizzy at this point.
I know, we better let him off the hook here. We better let him relax. So today we're going to be talking about the Ming Dynasty. We're also going to be talking about the last emperor. The last emperor, that is quite a story. But before we get to that, we're going to catch up with where we were by doing a little quick review of what we did last week. So last week, we talked about the time of the eunuchs and the concubines. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Yeah, that was horrifying, because what that was all about was, it was really horrifying. It was that in the palace, it was mainly populated by eunuchs and concubines. The concubines are there because what is the emperor's #1 job?
Heirs.
Produce an heir, exactly, produce an heir. And so that's why the concubines are there. And why are the eunuchs there?
So they won't produce.
The emperors.
Yes, say that again, Pat.
So that they won't produce heirs.
So that they won't produce, so that when an heir is born, there's no question about parentage. And that's why, well, if you're dominated by eunuchs and concubines, what was happening was the concubines, they become the mothers of these heir apparents, and who do they want to inherit the throne? Their son. So what is happening behind, what despicable deeds are going on behind the scenes between, yes, yeah, it's horrible. It's it's absolutely horrible what's happening. So they're vying and conniving to be able to conceive and have children, sons, and then once they do, you have to use all of your skill and cunning to keep that child alive in their own home, in their own, it's an awful thing. And the eunuchs are not much better, so they are teaming up with certain concubines, whoever they think has the better chance at succeeding. They are making themselves wealthy, and how are they doing that? Well, they're the ones that have the heir of the emperor. The emperor is being, they're consulting, they're the ones who have the most influence over the emperor. So they're going to persuade the emperor to do the things that would benefit them and not the country. And so it was a very, very difficult time. This man, we talked about him last week, we decided we were going to call him Don because we're trying to just make everything as simple as we can. So he is a field general, and he's really good at it. He was so good at it that the court, the palace, asked him to come and serve as a guard for the emperor. So Don is in there, in the court, in the palace. He sees what's going on because he's serving as bodyguard for the emperor. Well, he doesn't really care for this and he wants to get out of it. He leaves, he goes back to the frontier. And what's the frontier for him? Well, it's the Silk Road.
It's what?
The Silk Road.
Silk Road.
Yeah, he's protecting the northern border. He's protecting the Silk Road. So he is in a prime position because that is where the wealth is flooding in, is the Silk Road. So he gains in power, and ultimately what happens is the country hears that one of the eunuchs has taken the young emperor hostage. So he comes in with his army claiming to want to protect the emperor. But what does he really want?
For himself.
Yeah, that's what he really wants. So he comes, and rather than protect the emperor, who's 8 years old, who's 8 years old, he takes him hostage, he burns down the city, burns it to ashes, and then he goes on this destructive, gluttonous spree that is so bad and so blatantly self-serving that his best friend, his number one men, actually set up a coup. And what they do is they say, come to this place because we're going to crown you emperor. And when he arrives, of course he believes it because he's so puffed up, right? And when he comes to be crowned emperor of China, what happens?
They kill him.
They kill him. And that is that story familiar to anybody?
I wish it were.
Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Same exact thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Betrayed by his best friends. Betrayed. So that leads us into the time of the three kingdoms, which eventually comes together again. Then we went through very quickly the Tang Dynasty, and the thing that was really predominant there was within the Tang Dynasty, they had their one and only female emperor. All right, they had a female emperor, and it was during this time, which comes down to the 10 kingdoms. The 10 kingdoms, kind of shaky and uncertain, certainly not as strong as a unified China. And who was able to come in during this time?
Oh, Kublai Khan.
Yeah, remember? Yes, Kublai Khan. He was able to come in and dominate, and he took China, and he was the very first non-Chinese emperor ruling over a unified China. And he did things very differently from his grandfather. Who's his grandfather? Yes, exactly. Who was just brutal and used psychological warfare to get peoples to just not resist. He did the opposite. He adopted Confucianism, and he supplied grain for the poor people. He was just, hi John. He was more of a socialist, and so he made that transition a little bit easier. And we remember from last week the Mongol Empire. Oh my gosh. This is the height of the Mongol Empire. Yes, a big wow. Yeah, massive, absolutely massive. And we remember from last week that it was Kublai Khan that established the new capital in China. And do you remember what is that new capital? Say it aloud, say it louder.
Beijing.
Yes, you've got it. Beijing. All right, and so it was this dynasty, which is the Yuan dynasty, lasted about 100 years, and that kind of wraps up everything that we discussed from last week. You all remember all of that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So that brings us to today. Today we're going to start with a brand new dynasty, the Ming Dynasty. This is Hong Wu, and Hong Wu is not his birth name. It is a name given to him because it means vastly martial. That's the literal translation, but it just means great warrior, a great warrior. All right, and he would have to be, because who did he have to overthrow to become emperor? The Mongols, right? That massive empire. So he's just a peasant. And he rises up as a peasant in a rebellion against the empire, the ruling empire, and he's successful. He chooses the name Ming. This says Ming, and these two symbols separately actually represent the sun and the moon. So if you think of the sun and the moon, what is this trying to emote in this name, the Ming Dynasty?
The rise and the fall. They own it.
And light. So but I think, yeah, you're already, it could represent so many things, right? But brightness, light, the sun and the moon. All right, now I told you all of that just so I could tell you this. All right, I gave you the meaning of everything. Because the grandson, named Young Lo, who becomes the third Ming Dynasty emperor, he's a really fascinating guy. And I want you to know that Young Lo, his name means perpetual happiness. And I found him in yellow, which I thought was appropriate. So I found the yellow robe to tell you that his name means perpetual happiness. Now let's find out about this interesting character, okay? Because he's an overachiever. We'll call him an overachiever. Kind of like, remember the first emperor? Kind of like that. Okay, so one night, the emperor has a dream. He has a dream, and in this dream, he sees that peoples from faraway lands, many peoples from faraway lands across the ocean are coming to him, and they are bringing tribute to him, and they are honoring him. That's a pretty good dream, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretty great dream. Well, he apparently enjoyed that dream so much that he decided, well, I need to make that happen.
Yeah.
All right? And how are you going to make that happen if you're going to have all kinds of people from faraway lands across the ocean come to you and pay you tribute? How can you make that happen? With a fleet. All right? So our emperor of perpetual happiness makes an army that has never ever been seen before. He commissions hundreds and over 300 ships. All right? This is a navy, but it also has another specific purpose. Do you see these larger ships? Mm-hmm. These are treasure ships. So what he wants to do is he wants to load his treasure ships with the wonderful things, the wonderful merchandise of China. Bring it all out into the known world and start trading with them. And the known world will love these things so very much that they will pay tribute in order to have the privilege of trading with China. And that's exactly what happens. He has his general and his admiral, I'm sorry, that's a big mistake, I'm sure. And he's got his fleets and his sailors, and he goes out 7 times. He goes on 7 great expeditions, and he brings back over 30 countries that are now paying tribute to China on these expeditions. Isn't that amazing? And when you think about this, I was looking for some frame of reference, and I found this, which was pretty great. So this is about 60 or 70 years before Columbus sails.
Wow.
Okay? All right, and let's take a look at a comparison of a treasure ship to Columbus. And the other thing too is that the Chinese knew about scurvy, and so they had arranged, they were prepared for that, so their sailors never suffered from scurvy. Yeah, so they were prepared for that. So these are the journeys that the admiral made in just a few years and brought such wealth back to China. So no wonder he was perpetually happy. Right? As we go along, you're going to see just how apropos that name becomes. All right, so now I said that he's an overachiever, right? So you would think that just this fleet of ships, just this navy alone, would be a mammoth accomplishment. But while they were out sailing, he had some work for the people at home to do. Okay? So he's going to take the capital, Beijing, that belonged to the Mongols, and he's not going to move it to someplace else because that would not express dominance, would it? What would express dominance? If you want to firmly establish yourself as the dominant power, you build bigger and better on top of the former rule. You see what I'm saying? And that's exactly what he did. Now, this is so mammoth and so intricate and so stunningly beautiful that I have to show it to you in 2 videos. Do you know what this is?
Forbidden City.
Yes, exactly. It is the Forbidden City. In the first clip, what I'm going to show you is an aerial view. And then in the second clip, what I'm going to show you is the more close-up, intricate details of the city itself.
does that moat go around the whole city?
Goes out to the palace, so they never had to mingle.
The Forbidden City is a city, but it's the palace. It's the palace. Only the royals could be there. So the royals, the emperor, the royal family, and the eunuchs, all that space.
And the concubines.
And the company.
Yeah, that's the family. Yeah, the concubines are the family. Yes, all that space is just and only for the emperor. It's called the Forbidden City because no one else could go in there. And guards, they had guards could go in there too.
When did they open it up, Michelle?
They opened it up 1 year after, well, we'll get to there.
Okay.
Actually, we're going to get to there because we're going to talk about the last emperor. So now what I want to show you is, you saw how huge it is, right? I want to show it to you really up close and the kind of detail that went into it.
City involved countless bricks, tiles and other construction materials, and all were made according to highly complicated processes, and this is to say nothing of the numerous decorative carvings. Behind the hall named Bao, which means preserving harmony, lies the largest flight of stone steps carved out of a single piece of stone. Four very impressive-looking octagonal towers were built to guard the corners of the Forbidden City. Each tower has 9 beams, 18 pillars, 72 bridges, and 1,500 other parts. No seams are visible. All the parts were joined using mortise and tenon construction techniques. In every sense, these towers are a marvel.
What do you think of that?
Very impressive.
It has to be fabulous. So you've been, Pat?
Yeah.
And Peggy? You've been? And okay, yes. Oh, good. It, yeah, it was open, it was forbidden for hundreds of years until the abdication in 1912, but we'll get to that. And then the next year, they opened it up to the public, so you can go there now. Not everything is, you don't have access to everything, is that right? There's some sectioned off places?
You definitely have guides.
Yes, I'm sure, yeah, but it has to be just spectacular to see, and just inconceivable how large it is. We saw the aerial view, but I'm sure that if you're actually there, to be in that courtyard, they say it would fit 10,000 people. 10,000 people could be in the courtyard. Okay, and it was the Ming Dynasty. We had talked about this earlier with the Qing Dynasty, that they had built the wall, but it was the Ming Dynasty that built it up and built it in a way that it looks today. And they did extend it also, but what we're seeing today was enhancements done by the Ming Dynasty. Now, have you all heard that you can see the Great Wall of China from space?
Yeah, I don't think it's so.
Everybody's heard that?
Yeah.
And everyone's wondering whether or not that's true?
Probably not.
Well,
I think it's
I went on the NASA website, all right? So I can tell you, it's true.
Really?
It's true.
Okay.
This is from NASA. I went to nasa.gov. So this is the Great Wall of China from NASA, and you can see it from space. All right, so now that we've solved that mystery, let's come back to Earth. All right, so let's come back to Earth. This is an actual place in China. Isn't that stunningly beautiful? And I chose that specifically because it is from the Ming Dynasty that we have a lot of spectacular art. And the artwork is known for its landscapes. Well, if you have landscapes like this, I would feel inspired also. So would you like to see some of the artwork? Some of the landscapes, and you'll recognize these from the Ming era of nature. Their art was very natural. And then there's another thing that the Ming Dynasty is famous for. Anyone want to take a guess? You got it, Pat. You've got it. Yes. Now we know that they had porcelain. We know that, but they perfected it during the Ming Dynasty. And all of Europe, this is, you know, the fleets, the trade, everybody was crazy about the porcelain, the china that was coming from China. But I wanted to show you something just so you can kind of get an idea. In Europe, pottery looked like this, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's really rustic and there's nothing wrong with it. But that's what they were used to seeing. But when these ships, when these fleets came with merchandise that looked like this, so you can see why in Europe they were just absolutely crazy about this, and they would pay great huge amounts of money to have this Ming era china. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? And it was the blue. They had created this blue and no one had seen it before. In fact, they were trying in Europe, they were trying desperately to mimic the process, and they could not figure it out. They just couldn't figure it out. They wanted to reproduce this. They wanted to make, you know, the generic brand because it was so expensive to buy the real thing. And it took them a really, really long time to figure it out. I did find, as I was searching for this, I did find a modern interpretation of the Ming era porcelain that I thought you might like to see.
Wow. Beer can.
Okay, I'll see you next week. Is that great? Don't you love that?
Yeah.
I would buy that. And then the jewelry, look at the jewelry. These are for the women's hair. These went into the women's hair. Look at that.
Wow.
Isn't that stunning? Here's some typical royal robes. These are made of silk, but these are not authentic. These are replicas. These are reproductions, but that's the style.
Is that what they call a kimono?
Yeah, kimono, made out of beautiful silks. And then this, if you were the emperor and empress, you would have been dressed like this. And these two, again, are reproductions, but I did find from museums in China, I found some silks from that time. And here are some authentic silks and designs in silk. Can you imagine, look at this. from that time. So the Ming Dynasty, which lasted about 275 years, was very productive, and it is like another golden age, just like we saw in the Han Dynasty. But all good things come to an end, right? All things come to an end, and so we have the decline of the Ming Dynasty and the rise of the Qing Dynasty. And how did that happen? Well, in 1644, there's another peasant rebellion. There's another uprising, and the Ming Dynasty was having a hard time dealing with that. So they asked their neighbors to the north, Manchuria, to come in and help them defend the Forbidden City. So the people of Manchuria decide that they will go and help, except they have an ulterior motive. What would that be?
Take over.
Exactly, exactly. But they had to have been the Ming government had to have been so desperate for the help. I'm sure they must have been aware of that potential, and it did happen. However, it wasn't as bad as it could have been, because what the Manchurian people with the Qing Dynasty did was they incorporated Chinese culture, they incorporated the Chinese government that existed into their new government. All right, so they just folded them in, and it was a lot easier to take in that way. That brings us up to our final emperor, our final time in the Chinese history of emperors. And it ends with this little guy. I know. This is Puyi. Yeah, Puyi is his name. And these are actual photos of Puyi. And he is in the royal family. Here he is in a photograph with his father. That's Puyi, and that's his little brother. And the emperor at the time, when he's just 2 years old, dies. And the person in charge, well, the person in charge is someone called the Dragon Lady. She is the Empress Dowager. A dowager, do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. All right, so she's the Empress Dowager. And she was actually very famous for having placed on the throne very young emperors. And why would she do that?
She could control them.
She could control them, and that she could be in power for a lot longer. And when they get to be a certain age, when they're going to be independent, what mysteriously happens to them? Yeah, so she's the Dragon Lady. And so she's getting on in age, and she has decided that the next emperor is going to be this little guy. This is from the movie. This is Puyi, right? That's an actual photograph.
Yeah.
But I didn't have him in full,
Yeah.
imperial costume. So that's from the movie The Last Emperor. So she chooses him, all right? He has to go to the palace, that huge place, that giant place we just saw, without his family. All right, without his mother. He's 2 years old. He's 2 years old. He meets the Dragon Lady, and she announces that he is the new emperor. Well, at 2 years old, he also holds the distinction of being the youngest named emperor in all the history of China. And so there's a coronation, in that courtyard that holds 10,000 people, a big grand to-do, and it's recorded that he just cried the whole time.
I bet.
He cried the whole time. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't have his mother, he doesn't know what's going on, there's all this noise happening. All right, so now who's his family? This is also an actual photo. Who's his family? Yeah, the concubines are, oh, and the dragon lady dies the day after she announces him. The day after,
How
yeah.
did he do that?
No, she was old, she was,
Oh.
yeah, she was old, yeah. No, she was way too powerful, I don't think anyone could have gotten to her. She was really powerful, the dragon lady. All right, so now his family is the next dowager, Empress Dowager. I think there were 3 or 4 of them in the palace at the time. And the eunuchs, and that's who is raising him. Do you think he was spoiled? Yeah, really spoiled, really spoiled. But at the same time that he's a total spoiled brat, like severely, obnoxiously spoiled, and every single thing is done for him, and I do mean everything. He's also a prisoner because he cannot leave. He can't leave. He cannot leave the Forbidden City. So he's trapped within its walls. And if that is the case, then is he a worldly young person? Does he know what, he doesn't know what's going on? Well, there's all kinds of things brewing in his country that he believes he's the leader of, that ultimately, no, we're not here yet, but ultimately results in this conflict right here. All right, so as these uprisings are brewing, the Empress Dowager and his father, who are acting as regent for him, they find that it's too overwhelming, that they're not going to be able to survive this, and so they abdicate. First, his father abdicates his regency and backs down. That leaves the Dowager really in charge. And she doesn't feel like she can hold on. And so she agrees to an abdication treaty, and in that, with the Chinese government of the time. And in that treaty it says that they, the royal family, can continue to live in the palace, in the Forbidden City, that the government would support it financially, was the second condition, and the third was that the government would protect the Qing Dynasty tombs, so the sacred tombs of their ancestors. Remember, in this culture there's ancestor worship, so that was really important. And the government agreed to those 3 things, and then they abdicated. All right, Pu Yi was 6 years old when this happened. He's living in a sequestered, cloistered, magnificent palace, but he has no idea. Everything is going on because in the treaty they can still live there and live as they always had. There he is on the throne, and he has no clue. He has absolutely no idea that he is not the emperor. Has anyone ever read this book?
Yes.
It is a heart-wrenching depiction of China, of what a poor farmer's life in China at this time, during this time, the time of the last emperor. And it is a very powerful book. It's a powerful depiction of how people lived, and it just helps you to understand. So I don't know if we have it in the library. That would be good to know.
I think it's in the library up by the cafe.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
The classic song.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. So, yeah, so if you haven't read it, or if it's something you'd like to reread, considering all the conversations that we've been having, it would be a great thing. It's just a powerful, powerful book. Okay, so now his life has gone on just as normal, and he really is not understanding what's happening in the outside world until something wonderful happens. He has a teacher that's brought in. There's a teacher from England that is brought in to help him learn English and some of the Western ways. This is Sir Reginald Johnston. And Sir Reginald Johnston and Puyi get along beautifully. They become very, very, very close. And I have a telephone there because Sir Johnston, when he came, not only convinced the royal court to allow Puyi to get glasses. They didn't want the emperor to appear to have any flaw. So they resisted. They wouldn't get him glasses. And so he had to fight to get him glasses. He also brought in this newfangled thing called the telephone. And Puyi, who had been so secluded from everything, he just couldn't get over it. This telephone was hooked up, and the reports are that the Emperor of China randomly called people on the phone. He called them just randomly, just to talk to them. And in some reports, and I don't know if this is true or not, but some of the reports of these random phone calls that he made, he would discuss, he'd really like to get out of the Forbidden City and what's on the outside, and how do you think I could do that? Because he just didn't know. He just didn't know how to do that. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know. But those are the reports. But he did make random phone calls. He would just call people. And I think this is so important. I bring it up because you need to know how innocent and naive this person is. All right? He is sincerely this naive that he would make random phone calls and ask about how he might get out. Well, the reason why that's important to know is because in 1924, the government revoked the treaty. He's 18 years old. He's also married. He's married and has a concubine. Just the two. There's only the two. But he has to leave. All right, so here's the palace he's been trying to escape from all his life. He only left once, and that was to see his mother. She was addicted to opium, and she was dying from an overdose, and they let him go see his mother. And that was it. That was the only time he ever left. But now he has to leave, and he's got nowhere to go. They're just telling him, you've got hours to get out, you and your whole everybody. Gone. All right, so 1924, and it was 1925 when they opened it to the public. They opened it a year after they left. They had to fix it up. So he leaves, and he goes to stay with his father for a little while. Now his naivety comes into play here. Just the year before, in 1923, there is a crippling, devastating earthquake in Japan. And Puyi feels very badly about this when he hears this, and he sends a huge donation for recovery. And because it was so huge, it was a massive donation, they sent dignitaries personally to go to thank him for what he had done. Now, once the Japanese dignitaries did that and they met him, they were blown away by how naive this guy is. And so they go back and report and say, let's keep our eye on him because, he would be really easy to manipulate. And that's exactly what they did to him. That is exactly what they did. What?
occupying Ukraine.
That's what, so this is what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. So Japan, then in 1931, Japan invades Manchuria. All right, they invade Manchuria. Do you remember where Puyi comes from? The Qing Dynasty was the dynasty that came in to help the Ming. He is Manchurian. Puyi is Manchurian. The Japanese have invaded this Manchuria, northern part of China, and now they have a puppet leader who would do a splendid job, because not only is he the former emperor of China, but he's Manchurian. You see what I'm saying? So they use him, they entice him to come, they're going to crown him, they make it its new state, and they're going to crown him as emperor of this new state. And does he believe them? Sure. Of course he does. He believes it. He believes it. I have actual footage of the coronation.
Leads the ceremonial procession which marks his accession to the throne. Following the troubled years of contention between Japanese and Chinese in the Far East, this enthronement is the first real step for settled government since the state became the responsibility of the Japanese. The ceremony is conducted with typical Eastern splendor, befitting the establishment of a new empire, Manchuria.
How does China feel about that?
It's up there.
I know. It's so thoughtful of me when I ask a question and the answer's right behind me. It's really considerate of me to do that. They called him a traitor. And of course they would think he's a traitor. He's going to a Japanese occupied part of China as their emperor. So they're considering him a traitor. But he, in his mind, feels like that's where he's from and that's the right thing. That's his rightful place to be. So, ultimately, we all know history. Okay, the Allied forces do what? Yep. They take over, they win. And Puyi is actually captured by the Russians, and then the Chinese diplomat negotiates for his return, so they want him sent back to China. They send him back to China, and he's going back not as an emperor, but as a what? A prisoner. He's going back as a prisoner. And so now what we've got is, can you look into these faces and choose which one might be the Emperor of China?
You got the white shirt on?
Now, he's actually not in here, but it's just... I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. I actually cut him out, and I'll tell you why I cut him out. I cropped him out. He is in this photo. I found so many, and I felt like people photographed him, you know, in humiliating ways, you know, because to show an emperor totally falling completely from such heights, and to get a photograph of him in prison, or to get a photograph of him, he becomes a gardener, actually, and there's photographs of him doing that, and I just felt like these photographs were an unnecessary, undignified kind of way of humiliating him, and so I did crop him out. But what I put this up here for was to was to say that he just becomes
One of the many.
one of the many. This is what he becomes.
Oh,
All right, this is his name, this is his identity. For 10 years. He's in prison for 10 years as a traitor. And this is a reform. This is a system of reform, not of punishment. And so they are working with him. And it is so sad because when he went to prison, this man did not know how to tie his shoes. He didn't know how to brush his teeth. That's how spoiled and secluded and unreal. He was in this absolutely unreal world. And then thrown out, spit out into a very harsh wartime world. And the fact that he survived at all, I think, is kind of amazing. But he does get out, and like I said, he becomes a gardener. He just becomes like a commoner, and he lives out his life. He does reconnect with some of his family, his brothers. His father would have nothing to do with him because, again, remember, he's a traitor. But he did connect with two of his brothers. And he was able finally to be buried. He died in 1967, and he was eventually able to be buried in a tomb of the Qing family cemetery, yes, with his ancestors, even though he was considered a traitor. Now, if you will bear with me, all right, just a few minutes, because we are concluding our series on China, and we only just kind of barely covered. It's so intricate and fascinating. I wanted to end with something truly beautiful, and that had to be the country itself. And so I've got some beautiful sceneries for you. So that we can just enjoy our last moments of our series on China. Okay, well,
There's a lot of beauty in the world.
that was our series on China. We have Barbara to thank for that. Thank you, Barbara. I know I enjoyed it. You're welcome. I enjoyed it very, very much. So I can't wait to hear what you all come up with for our next series.
Japan.
What?
Russia.
I know that you want, come to philosophy, that's where we're talking about that.
Yeah.
So you've got to come to philosophy, that's where we're discussing it. Oh, yes.
When there was a switch there with Beijing and Peking, the name. It's
Yeah.
the same place, but how did they,
The
Oh.
Europeans called it Peking.
pardon?
The Europeans called it Peking.
Okay, because it was even on one of the maps. I
Yeah.
just didn't know where they made the changeover to officially make it Beijing again. Because I had heard when I was growing up it was Peking.
That's right, yeah, I remember that too. You threw me, I don't know.
I'm sorry.
So 2 weeks, so we have 2 weeks off and then we will reconvene, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. It was a very nice series, thank you, Barbara.
2 weeks off?
2 weeks off.